Hi, folks. It's TJ here. I called this Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About TJ because I'm just going to share it all, start from the beginning and lead you up to where I'm at now. My name is TJ Moonen. I was born June 5th, 1964, at the Hale Hospital in Haverhill, Massachusetts, to Michael and Dorothy Moonen. My name is Thomas Joseph Moonen. I was the seventh child born to my parents, four girls, three boys. My oldest brother, Mickey, passed away 13 years before I died. I never got the chance to meet him. He died in a tragic fire in New York City, Jackson Heights, where my parents were living when he was born. He was born in 1946, and my other brother, Patrick, was my sister Ellen's twin. The two of them were born in 1948. Patrick died when I was 8. Hence the name for my Facebook page now. That's where I got the name, my two brothers, Mickey and Patrick. I was, life was pretty normal for me until about age 10. Of course, losing two brothers, and there was a lot of abuse in the house. My father was an Irish Catholic Marine sergeant who had lost his firstborn son and kind of took it out on the family at the time, which was my mom, my four sisters, and specifically my middle brother Patrick. He suffered an awful lot of abuse. From what I've heard, this is what I've heard from my sisters. My older sisters. My younger sister, or at least the youngest of the four, who is still older than me. Everybody's older than me. I'm the baby. My older sisters told me about what Patrick had to deal with as a child. He in New York, my parents had sent him to at one point. One of the stories I heard was my parents had sent him to a Catholic school, a boarding type of school, and he came home for Christmas one year and found that they don't live there anymore. They had moved up to Massachusetts, and nobody had told him. So that's the kind of life he lived. So anyways, Patrick had a tough life. He was a child of the 60s, born in the late 40s. He was a teenager during the 60s, and I don't know much about him. I actually only met him once. He had come back. He was living in Seattle, and he came back here one year for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And remember, he brought me a pair of pajamas. And the one thing I remember him telling me was it had a pocket, and he said, "That's for your cigarettes. That's where you keep your cigarettes." And now I wasn't planning on smoking ever. He says, take and drag. But I was an athlete. I played baseball, football, hockey, basketball. I was very much a jock. And my father nurtured that in me. My father may have treated my older sisters poorly, but I guess he felt like he had a chance to rectify the damage he had done to them by making me, helping me to become something better than, or at least as much as I could be. It's been a very crazy life I've lived. My dad nurtured, like I said, he taught me baseball, and I was a really good baseball player. My little league team won 5 championships in a row. And we went to Toronto, Canada, to play a series that if we had won, we would have gone to Williamsport, been in the Little League World Series, but that just didn't work out. Anyways, when I was 10, something strange happened. My sister was babysitting me, her and her friend Esther Goodrow, and they decided to play a game with me and teach me how to have sex. And I ended up having sex with Esther Goodrow, my sister's friend. My sister was there watching the whole time, and I honestly don't remember it. I remember having sex with her, being on top of her, but I couldn't even tell you what she looks like. I remember her name just because, unfortunately, she was my first. And it happened a couple of times more after that with other friends of hers. And in fact, her and her friend Linda used to babysit me as well as Linda's younger two sisters. And they would play a game with us called Strip TV Guide, where we had to guess the name of the TV show or the day that they opened the TV guide up to, or if we missed, we had to take a piece of clothing off. And by the end of it, the three of us had all had sex with each other. It was pretty sad looking back on it. We didn't know what we were doing. 10 years old, 11 years old. It became kind of weird after that. Very weird after that. Strange things were happening. I did things I'm not proud of. That don't need to be mentioned. Excuse me for 1 second. I gotta get tissues. My apologies. I'm back. Okay. I think I fixed the light a little bit. There we go. All right. And as I grew older, 11, 12 years old, my sister started getting real weird, and and eventually a couple of times her and I had sex. It just was, at the time I didn't know what it was, but looking back on it now, I know exactly what it was. And, I've resolved it. My sister and I worked through it later in life. I'll talk about that in a while. But I was doing really good in baseball. And like I said, Little League was going great. And when I was 12, actually 3 days before my 13th birthday, my father passed away. It was difficult. My 13th birthday, I'm at the wake of my father, and all of a sudden I'm the man of the family. I've got 4 sisters all living elsewhere, trying to teach me how to live from long distance. It was me and my mom for the most part. Even my sister Mary, who was the abuser, had moved on to bigger and better things, I guess. I'll get back to that, but it was tough. So it was me and Mom was a basket case. She'd lost 2 sons and now her husband, and all of her daughters were elsewhere. I was the only one there, and she really got heavy into drinking, pills, and it took its toll on her, and I was pretty much left to my own devices. Well, I'd grown up in Haverhill. I knew everybody in town. Everybody knew me. I connected with some people that I guess I was supposed to, but I probably never should have. I started getting into alcohol and drugs, smoking marijuana, stuff like that, and doing different types of drugs of the 70s. Those were the days. It was kind of free-spirited back then. Still, this was pre-AIDS. I got caught up in it and became a very dysfunctional human being. I mean, I held a job. I was a disc jockey at a roller skating rink, and I ran a bowling alley for a little while. But everything that happened was crazy, and it lasted about 3 years. I was on a 3-year binge. I started drinking and doing drugs at 13 and didn't stop until I was absolutely forced to, which was when I was 16. Mom decided that her and I were going to move out to Southern California with my older sister, Ellen. And in 1980, her and I and my sister Ellen drove from Haverhill, Massachusetts to Los Angeles, California, just south of LA, Torrance to be exact. And hell of a ride, me, my older sister, and my mom, a week in the car heading cross country. I'm 16 years old, listening to my Walkman or whatever I had back then, and Black Sabbath and all the cool tunes. It took too long. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to leave my friends here. It was just a bad time for me. When we got out there, me and my mom got a place. My sister was completely into it. But it just wasn't for me at that time. I got back. I had quit high school before we left Massachusetts and pretty much just worked, and when I got paid, bought beer and joint and weed and whatever. And out in LA, what ended up happening, or Torrance, I got into high school again, and it was, it wasn't for me. I couldn't do school. It was, I don't know. I've always been antisocial. That's just the way I've always been. So I quit high school again. Ended up going back to another high school, trying again. And what happened was my sister out there, my older sister Ellen, connected me with a guy who worked at a company called Gemco. It was a membership department store, kind of like Costco and those now. And you paid $1 and you could go in and shop. It wasn't really anything spectacular. I mean, it was one of the first department stores I ever saw that had a full grocery department along with it. It was a huge store, massive warehouse, which we took advantage of. And I worked the overnights during the Christmas season, and it was during the Cabbage Patch Kids thing. And whew, what a trip that was. But what ended up happening is when I got the job there, I started hanging out with people that I'll do what I did when I lived back here. And, come to my surprise, the weed was a whole lot better out there. There were a lot more drugs. It was far more liberal. We must have gotten pulled over a dozen times, and just, the most sober one could drive home. It was really a crazy time. It was back in the 80s, and life was a lot more simple, a lot less regulated. We'll put it that way. All right, that's probably the best word I can come up with. LA was quite a trip, like I said. I was there for almost 5 years, and the truth is, I don't remember a lot of it because I was messed up. I did manage to hold a job the whole time I was there, and what ended up happening was back in at the end of my stay there. The reason it was the end of my stay was my mom and her new husband, Al, who became a very good friend of mine long after that. I never liked him. Him and my mom went to Vegas one weekend, got married, and didn't even tell me. I found out like a week later. But, the times were different then. I got involved with these people, and we did some crazy things, but I'll tell you what, I had a lot of great memories. What I do remember was phenomenal. A lot of concerts, a lot of parties, a lot of great people, a lot of beautiful, beautiful people. But what was strange to me was, and I couldn't figure it out the whole time I was there. I'm here. The store, the department store I worked at, was literally a 5-minute walk to the beach. And I mean, the women that came through that store were just ridiculous in a good way. And even the ones that worked there were some that were just wow. But the whole time I was out there, I never had sex. Well, I had sex once, and that was literally by accident. Um, and that was near the end when I was coming back here. And what ended up happening was in 1984, the summer of '84, my mom and her husband went to Indiana to see his mother, and they were going to be gone for 3 weeks. And basically, my home became party central. Everybody would come to my place. We'd have big parties. People staying over, using all the beds. It was crazy. That was the one time I got laid by accident. But what happened was my parents came home 3 days early, and to my surprise, I was at work when they got home, and the girl that I had living with me, ironically, her name is Renee Jackson. It's ironic, I'll explain later. But she was there, and the place was trashed. I mean, she was there to keep the place clean, and she did the best she could, put all the empties in trash barrels and stuff like that. But my parents ended up taking her with them to my work. And I saw them coming down the aisle with her, and I just kind of froze. And I'm sure that I needed a change of underwear when I was done. But all that happened was my stepfather and my mom came up to me, and my stepfather, he had a smile on his face. And all he said is, we'd really like you to come home right after work today. I said, okay, I'll be there. I was deathly scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. Now, at the time, I was 19 or 20. I was near my 20th birthday, and way too irresponsible for my age. I get that now. Looking back, they did the right thing. What ended up happening was they basically kicked me out. They told me I had 2 weeks to find another place to be. So, I was making good money too. I was, it doesn't sound like much now, but I was taking home like $350, $400 a week. Back in the 80s, that was good money. And of course, we get paid on Friday, and it was gone Saturday, Sometimes we'd drive out to Vegas on Friday night, blow a whole wad, except for enough to get gas money home and come back. Good times, but we were always broke. But we always made sure we had weed, and there was always alcohol available. Some of the greatest people I've ever known in my life lived in Southern California. Probably the best friend I've ever had in my life, Don Tybor, God rest his soul. He passed away a few years back. He came to my wedding eventually later in life, but he was a good man, and a tortured soul, and I missed Don. I've missed Don for a number of years. Desiree Rector, Jim Stazak, Adrian Cook, John Debelak. It was just, we had a group of people that just were always together, always doing things. Bob Vogue, Mike Vogue, his brother, Steve Martinez. There were a bunch of us. And it was just really a good time. And I met some great people. And some of those people are still my friends. Desiree was here a couple years ago. We've separated and gotten back together a number of times as far as friends. Our friendship is concerned through social media. I'll always love Desiree. She'll always be one of my favorite people on the planet. Oh, God, I hope this is loud enough. I don't know if my microphone is loud enough, so I'm going to get a little closer. I can watch the volume and see how loud I'm speaking and how loud I should be speaking. Okay, so anyways, they told me I had 2 weeks to move out, and I looked around, and even though I was making good money, there was no way I was going to live out there on my own. It wasn't an option. So I contacted my sister back here, my sister Karen, and asked if I could stay with her until I got back on my feet. And she agreed, under the condition that I don't drink and do drugs, which I certainly could understand. And of course, I agreed. And what ended up happening, I had no money. I had spent everything I had, and what ended up happening was I took my last $100 and bought a Greyhound bus ticket, and took a Greyhound bus from Los Angeles to Boston. Nightmare, more so than you can possibly imagine. All I had was my little Emerson boombox with detachable speakers, and a $10 fake gold watch, and a check that my mom wrote me for $10 that I wasn't going to be able to cash until I got back to Boston. So I really had nothing. And it's funny, when we got to New York, the bus station in New York, this Puerto Rican kid came up to me and asked me if I wanted to buy some cocaine. So I'd love to, but I ain't got no money. So he offered to take my watch and my boombox for, I believe it was a half a gram. I don't even remember now. But I agreed. It was less for me to carry, less weight. And, somewhere down the road, when I got to it, I got a little treat at the end of the ride. I figured I'd wait till I got back to my sister's house, and, even though I said I wouldn't, I was going to do it privately, and that's it. But that was going to be the final hurrah, right? There were many of those. But what ended up happening was I got back to Massachusetts, and when I got here to Mass, I had made arrangements with an old girlfriend, and she actually picked me up at the bus stop, and we went to her place, and she let me shower and all that. And we did end up spending some time together. Her name was Cheryl Duffy, but she ended up moving out to San Francisco probably maybe 3 months after I moved back here. So anything we were going to have wasn't going to happen. And what happened was I got involved in church with my sister and her husband, Ron Martin. Now, by getting involved in church, it set me on a bit of a different course and led me down a road I wasn't planning on going. I met a guy there. He was looking for a roommate, somebody to get a place with. And I was working. I got a job at a department store called Zayre in Lowell. And once again, it was overnight remodeling the store. And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of good times. Mid-'80s, all the hair bands, and I would get out of work, go home to Billerica, where the apartment was that me and this guy were renting. And one night I just decided, I had been sober since I moved back here from California. But one night I'm thinking, all right, I'm on my own now. I think I'm responsible, so I'm going to grab a 6-pack. And pretty much went on about a 9-month binge that ended up, I got 2 DWIs in a 3-week period, one in Mass, one in New Hampshire. So they were both first offenses. The one in Mass cost me $200. The one in New Hampshire, $700, because I had weed. I at the time, I had lost my job at Zayre, and I went to work at a place called Stewart's, another former department store here in New England. And what happened was, when I got arrested in New Hampshire, I had to go to the jail in Brentwood, and I didn't have bail money, so I had to stay there until my trial date, and that hadn't been set. It ended up, I ended up being in there for a week while I waited for my boss to bring me my last paycheck, so I could bail myself out. And he ended up bailing me out and giving me my last check, and took me out to breakfast and told me, you got a lot of potential, this and that. And he fired me. Okay, this is what it's supposed to be. So I said, okay. He took me to get my car out of impound, and shocked and chagrined, what did I find? The bag of weed is still on the passenger seat, and the bottle of schnapps is still in the glove compartment. So I said, just breathed a sigh of relief. I went to where I had moved to. I skipped a step. During the 9-month binge I was on, I moved from Billerica back to Hayville with one of my oldest friends, a kid I went to elementary school, Mike Rogers, with. And we had a nice house we were renting. It was really cool. But we were just so messed up, the two of us. And when I got out of jail, when I finally got home, there was a note on the door: "You've been evicted, get out." So I said, screw this. I went inside, I rolled a couple of joints, took a couple of shots of schnapps, and smoked myself to sleep. When I woke up, I had to figure out what I was going to do. And this is where the story gets real ugly. Starts getting real ugly. What happened was I went to see an old friend of my dad's, actually, this guy, Dan Denny, who had helped my dad sober up. My dad was sober about a year before he died. And I talked to Dan about, my problem. Excuse me. And he offered a solution, which was Alcoholics Anonymous, which I gave into. I didn't really have a choice at this point. I couldn't manage my life, and I had to do something. So what I ended up doing was going to AA meetings. And after I got evicted out of the house that me and Mike were renting, which was like the day after I got out of jail, I left that house. I went to my other sister's house, the abuser, and she let me stay with her until I got back on my feet. And I got a job at Kmart, where my aunt was the head cashier. She had been working there for like 30 years. And started going to AA. And when I got to Kmart, actually started enjoying life, I guess. It was kind of weird. But it was there that I met a young lady named Renee Como. Renee Como. RENEECOMEAU. And her and I started dating November 15th, 1985. I remember it to the day. I remember our first date. We went to a place called Fishland, where my best friend in the world, Brian McLeod, was the head cook. And he made us up a couple lobsters, fries, the shrimp, the whole night. I mean, it was gorgeous. Didn't cost a penny either. My finger was perfect. What ended up happening, Renee was wearing a white skirt and this really nice blouse. And we're sitting there talking, and she grabs the ketchup. It was hilarious looking back on it now. I mean, she was embarrassed to all hell. There were a few moments like that during our time together, but she grabbed the ketchup and started shaking it, and the cap wasn't on, all over her white blouse, right where it shouldn't be. So it looks like, that time of the month was profusely evident. Of course, we knew it was ketchup, and it was all I could do not to break out laughing, but, I tried to comfort her. And, anyways, that was our first date. Should have seen the tragedy that was about to happen, but there were a lot of signposts along the way. Anyways, about 3 weeks after we were dating, we went to the company Christmas party. And while she was sitting at the table talking to one of her friends, I was on the dance floor with another girl we worked with, Corinne McRae, and we were making out on the dance floor. And Renee didn't see it, but was told about it, and got real pissed off, obviously. Didn't talk to me for a couple of days, but eventually forgave me, and we began our relationship back, and really became much more solid after that. I didn't stray again while we were before we got married, put it that way. we developed a great relationship. We became the best of friends. We did everything together. We traveled to Canada, all over the place. We did a lot of fun stuff. It was during this time in my life that I met another great man, Chris Tracy. He is still a very good friend of mine. He lives down in Connecticut and is the chief engineer for 5 CBS radio stations, which is very cool. I love Chris to this day. But there's more to that story too. Renee and I, what ended up happening was Renee and I decided I kept asking her to marry me. I just wanted to get married. I didn't want to be alone, and I knew it, and I knew that's why I was asking her. And she just wanted the dream, the family, the husband, the kids, the house, the picket fence, all of that. And I figured I could provide it, give it my best shot. So I took a look at what I was doing with my life, working in retail and what I really wanted to do with my life. And being a sports freak like I am, I took a job at the Haverhill Gazette, the local newspaper, and it was in circulation. But that's where I met Chris Tracy. Him and I worked there together. He was a disc jockey overnights up here in Manchester, New Hampshire, and Renee and I used to go up to the station with him all the time and just have a lot of fun fooling around. I would pick the songs, he'd play them. We'd make fake tapes and stuff. I still have some of those tapes up until probably about 10 years ago. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of good times. But as I was working at the newspaper, I talked to the editor. Him and I had a heart-to-heart, and I told him that, my goal was to be a sports writer. And he told me to hang tough, and somewhere down the road, we would, look further into it as far as me getting into intern or something with the sports department. And it wasn't too long after that I asked. It was actually 1986. I'll never forget the day. It was Game 6 of the 1986 World Series in October. The Red Sox were playing the Mets. The Red Sox were 1 out away from winning their first World Series since 1918, something that everybody had been waiting for forever. And it was the bottom of the 8th inning, and I thought, okay, this is it. I know it's going to happen. So what I did was I got down on my knee and I took out the ring. I had been saving, and I actually had a ring on layaway, a wedding ring, an engagement ring. And I got down on my knee and I asked her to marry me. She said yes. We cried. We made love. It was a beautiful thing. And then the ball went through Buckner's legs, and the Red Sox lost, and they ended up losing the series. And, another signpost I should have seen. Stupid, but it is what it is. What ended up happening was after she agreed to marry me, I decided to get a part-time job. And because I had been sober and going to AA, I had met a lot of people who worked in human services as far as substance abuse counseling. So I took a part-time job at a homeless shelter in South Lawrence. Now, those of you who don't know South Lawrence, that's, they had riots there. It's really just not a happy place, not a good place at all. Hasn't been probably 40 years. I mean, there are still a couple of good spots and a lot of good people in Lawrence that I still know. But all in all, it's become a den of thieves, I guess, or whatever. Just a bad place to be. And the shelter that I worked at was what was known as a wet shelter, meaning that any transient could come in off the street under the influence of anything. They couldn't bring anything with them into the shelter, but if they were under the influence, that didn't prevent us from keeping them to be there. That was our job, to shelter people and to advocate, to help them get the treatment they need. And, I enjoyed the work thoroughly. it was so rewarding, really, just being able to help people and seeing people change. It was infrequent at best. There were a few success stories, but the truth is there were a lot of people that just lived at the shelter. That was their permanent address. And, so be it. I ended up liking the job so much that I left the newspaper and took on a full-time position at the shelter. And my boss, the program director, her name was Marilyn Bouchard, God rest her soul. Beautiful woman. She was a Marine, like my dad, and tough as nails. Oh, she was a better man than I ever was. But she was a good woman. She had a solid heart. And I've missed her dearly for many years. But while working at the shelter, I gained a great deal of knowledge about human behavior and how to interact with humans, men, women, whatever the case may be, and to help them. What ended up happening was I went back to school, got my GED, and I took a course in mental health. It was a substance abuse counselor thing. I was just going to do the 1 year and get my certificate and go on. And eventually I wanted to go back and, get the associates, the bachelor's, the master's. I wanted to be a psychologist in the end. But it was a really great experience, and I learned a lot. I worked at the shelter for 6, almost 7 years, and it was while I was at the shelter that my ex-wife and I got married. Renee Como and I got married, and I only use her name like that now because I want everyone to know who she is, and that'll come out later. And what ended up happening was we decided to get married. It was 1986, the end of 86. She said yes, that fateful night in Red Sox history. And she said yes. So we decided to make the date the following September. And I still don't know why we chose this particular date, but it was September 13th, which was a Sunday, 1987. And as it was approaching, it was exciting. We were planning it. And, we were really prospering. I was doing great at my work. I was actually making pretty decent money. She worked at the local hospital as a medical transcriptionist, which she had studied for. Pretty much following in her sister's footsteps. But so we were doing okay. We got a better place, a better apartment. And our life was progressing really well. And then in September of 87, I'll never forget the wedding day. God, it was a Sunday, and I got to the church. All morning long, I was a basket case. I had my tuxedo on. I had white socks. My best man, who was my brother-in-law, Ronnie, walked in the door and just started laughing his ass off. I didn't have any black socks. So we went down to Kmart, ironically, and I got some black socks. And we headed over to the church, and lo and behold, I don't have the license. Nobody got the license. Here it is Sunday afternoon. So we run like hell down to City Hall, go to the police station, which is at City Hall, and they told us that, pretty much out of luck, unless you can get in touch with the mayor. We ended up going to the mayor's house and eventually getting the license and back to the church. And the one thing that stood out to me about that day more than anything is, I swear to God, it rained harder that day than I've ever seen it rain before or since. And maybe that's just my perception, but It felt that way. But we got married. We had our reception, and it was a happy day. And I had never told my wife, about the sexual abuse that I went through as a child. And she started asking me questions about it because I guess my sister Karen, the one I moved back here from California a little bit, had been talking to her. They were the best of friends. We used to go to their house every Sunday, my sister and her husband. Renee and I used to go to their house every Sunday to church. We'd go a couple times a week for Bible study. We did many things together. Karen and Ron had 5 kids. And, it was just a beautiful, really a good time. We had a great time. I learned a lot about the different religions at that point. I guess I've always been a sponge learning things, but I've just learned what's been brought to me. I haven't really sought out knowledge up to that point, anyways. We got married September 13th, 1987, and I was working full-time at the shelter still at the time, and on December 29th of 87, I was going to work. I had a brand new little Honda CRX. It looked like a sneaker. Thing was like this big, very small, and 2-seater. It was snowing. We were having a snowstorm, and I was brushing the snow off the car, and I felt my back twinge, and I knew there was going to be an issue. But I said, screw it, I got to go to work. I have a job. That was just the way it was. So I got in my little car, which the seat probably is not more than 6 inches from the ground, really. When I get to the shelter, it was all I could do to get out of the car. I mean, my back was just shot. Yet I wasn't going to stop. I had a job to do. So there were 5 steps leading up to the front door of the shelter, and I went up these stairs, and it was just hell. And I got inside, and I didn't want to sit down because I knew I'd never get back up. So I leaned against the wall in the office while I got a recap on the day's events and what was going to be happening, and if there was anything new that needed to be discussed, or new clients, new residents, or whatever. And my back gave out. I just slid down the wall. They took me to the hospital where, what a nightmare. It took forever to get in to see anybody. And once I did, they put me on a gurney. They gave me one of those Johnnies, those dress things you wear. They put me on a gurney, and they're going to take me to X-ray. And what ended up happening was they had to wait for. There was a line of people going to X-ray. The place was always busy, I guess. And they left my gurney right outside the ambulance doors. So every 2 minutes, the doors are opening up, snow's blowing in. I'm freezing. My back is shot. It was a no-win situation. Really, really poor care. I went in. The doctor saw me. He gave me a shot of Demerol, all these other, what was a Flexeril, different muscle relaxers, boosters for the Demerol. I mean, I was tweaked. I hadn't been that high in a long time. Obviously, I was sober. By then, God, that was about a year and a half at that point I was sober. I stopped drinking in February of 86. So, almost 2 years. But anyways, what ended up happening was I was able to move thanks to the medication, and the doctor told me to sit in the waiting room, have the nurse call my ride. My ride was my boss from the shelter, not Marilyn, the assistant director, Mike Donahue. And what ended up happening, and I really feel stupid about it because it was entirely my fault, but I had to have a cigarette. It had been hours I was in the hospital, and I needed a cigarette. So I got up, I went outside. It was fine. My back was okay. And I came back inside, and the warm air hit me, and it just, boom, my head. I got so freaking lightheaded. It was terrible. So I went up to the nurses at the triage desk, and I said, "You got to help me. I'm extremely lightheaded. I think I'm going to pass out." And I'll never forget it. She said, "Have a seat. We'll be right with you." I woke up 3 days later in the ICU. Apparently, what happened was I passed out. I fell back and fractured my skull right over here. Now, I don't remember anything for those 3 days, but my newlywed wife was there every day. The nurse from the shelter, different residents, family members, everybody was coming in, and apparently I was awake and talking gibberish apparently, but I don't remember any of it. And ended up going home and getting trying to live with this situation, and it was very difficult. I was afraid to bang my head on anything. I mean, a pillow scared me. I couldn't sleep in our bed because I was afraid I'd bump heads with my wife. What ended up happening was I would sleep on the couch just surrounded by pillows. There was no way I was falling. Nothing was going to happen. I was very unsteady, constant vertigo. My ex-wife had to bathe me, feed. I mean, she became my mother more than my wife at that point. And it took about 6 weeks, 6 months, maybe 5-6 months before I could get back to work. And during that 5-6 months, we got so much help from the church and my sisters. My sister owned a little variety store in Massachusetts, and they put together boxes of food for us and stuff we were going to need that we couldn't get because we lost an income. I had a disability coming in, but it wasn't much. And our marriage kind of took a tough turn at that point. But my ex was stood by me. She was the best part of that whole situation because it made it so much easier for me. Not that it was ever easy, but God, I can remember laying in bed for hours upon hours at a time and not even being able to move my head. If I moved my head the slightest twinge, I would get the vertigo, dizziness, nausea. It was just awful. But once I finally recovered from all that, and believe me, that was a long, tumultuous time, and with a lot of treatment, a lot of dealing with insurances and bullshit. And we ended up getting an attorney trying to sue the hospital. That took a couple of years. And what ended up happening was it was at that point that I went back to school. I got my GED, went to college, got the certificate. And once I had this education, a whole year, I knew I was bound for bigger things than a homeless shelter in South Lawrence. So I applied for a position at a company in my hometown of Haverhill. It's called VinFen, VINFEN. And it was a group home for 8 chronic adult male schizophrenics. And I interviewed with Michelle Bailey. I'll never forget it. The one question she asked me that really caught me by surprise was, and I'll never forget this question because I've used it myself in hiring people. What do you consider more important, loyalty or competency? And to be honest with you, I don't remember what my answer was. I believe it was something to the effect of loyalty, because competency can be taught. But anyways, whatever it was, it worked. I got the job. I was starting a whole new life now. It was in town. I didn't have to go to Lawrence anymore. Life was good. Life was getting back to good. And it was a whole different world getting used to working with schizophrenics, and extremely educational for me. I got so much out of it. The company was based in Boston, and I became a big part of it as far as I was on the one of the boards, whatever. I became good at what I was doing as far as counseling. And the problem with the group home for me ended up being I was the only heterosexual male there. It was me, 5 women, and a gay guy, Kevin, good old Kevin. And having being married, and my wife and I really kind of lost something during the whole fractured skull experience. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying something was missing from my life. And I thought about it, back in the day out in California. I went 5 years out in Southern California and didn't have sex with one of those women. What the hell's wrong with me? Well, once I found out that, I was kind of attractive. I guess I was good looking, young and good looking back then. And this 19-year-old woman, I guess, her name was Marjorie, and Margie. She was 19 years old, absolutely drop-dead gorgeous, blonde hair, blue eyes, breasts the size of Wisconsin, just a drop-dead gorgeous woman. And we were downstairs in the laundry room doing something. I don't even know what it was, but just out of nowhere, she laid a big wet one on me. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know what that was all about. But, well, we ended up having an affair. And it was extreme. I didn't know what the hell I was. I don't know why I did it. I didn't know what I was doing. Sneaking around behind my ex's back, making arrangements to see her while my ex was at work, doing stuff like that. Margie, I still to this day question her motives, but Renee and I, my ex-wife, we definitely our thinking, our behaviors, my behavior especially changed at home. I didn't know really what I should be doing. I'm pretty sure she knew I was cheating. It was Valentine's Day, and we were having a staff meeting at the house, and my ex sent me a dozen roses, and she knew Margie would be there, and she just wanted to make sure that Margie knew that I'm married. But it really wasn't up to Margie. It was up to me, and I honestly didn't want to stop. It was fun. My ex was married. I wasn't. That's basically what it came down to. Well, I guess it was about April. No, I guess it was in May or June of 1990. I just couldn't take it anymore, and I told my ex, I said, I've been having an affair, and I'm going to end it. I don't want it to be there. I just want to end it. And that's where it got weird. I tried to end it. I wanted to end it, but Margie was very persistent. It took a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but I did eventually end it. And what happened was I decided that I'm not quite capable of controlling myself, so I need to figure out how to do that. So what had happened was my ex, when she found out about this, moved back into her parents' house. And I decided I was going to take a couple of weeks vacation. I had plenty of time at work, and go out to LA and see my old friends and just try to get my head back together again so I could, work my marriage out. Well, a week after my ex moved in with her parents, she came back to the house. and we were going to try again. And she talked me into letting her come with me out to LA. And to this day, I regret that, honestly. If I had gone away and gotten that time to myself, I knew where my head was at, and I probably would have straightened out and at least come up with an idea of why I was doing what I was doing. But I just agreed, let her, said, yes, you can come. And honestly, we had the time of our life. We were out there 2 days. We spent way too much money, which my credit score now will show you. But we had a great time, and turns out when we get back, she went to her doctor and had a bun in the oven. Well, lo and behold, here we are, back, married, pregnant, and, you know, everything's right with the world, you know. We started doing the Lamaze classes, the ultrasounds. And I remember one thing I didn't mention was I was in therapy. I was seeing a psychiatrist, psychologist, a therapist, really, Dr. Colin Supple, great man. And I worked with him for quite a while, actually, from when I first sobered up back in '86 through to, at this point, 1990. And while in therapy, that's really how I got to the point where I knew I needed to do something to learn how to control my behavior. So Renee and I, we did the Lamaze classes, and everything was going well. And then it was kind of ironic. My ex-wife and I, our first date, the day she spilled the ketchup all over herself, that was November 15th, 1985. Well, on November 15th, 1990, I was working at the group home. We were in Haverhill still. And it was like 10 o'clock at night, almost 11. And it was raining out. And I was sitting at the desk at the front of the home doing paperwork. All the guys were sleeping. And in comes this woman, soaking wet, hair dripping, long, full-length leather coat, brown hair. She looked up, and she had the bluest eyes I ever saw. I mean, she was just, and dripping wet. She was phenomenal. And she said she was a new per diem worker. She would be doing shifts here and there and at the different programs around, the VinFen programs. And she came to see what Michelle had her scheduled for. So I showed her the schedule and walked her out to her car in the soaking rain with an umbrella to keep her dry. And her rear window of her car, she had a Mercury Capri, her rear window was all smashed out. So I asked her what that was about. And she said that that her husband had done that. He was an abusive drunk. And they were separated. I said, oh, okay. So what ended up happening was she started working at the group home with us. And her name was Ann Byron. And Ann and I became close. We started getting closer and closer the more we worked together. The group home that we were working at in Haverhill ended up moving down to Salisbury Beach, literally right on Beach Road. And it was a big house, beautiful basketball hoop in the driveway, big old garage, just a phenomenal building. I know that I'm pretty sure there were 8 bedrooms, one for each of the guys. But when we got down there, it became a hell of a lot easier for us to spend more time together. Ann and I, that is. We would get out of work. I'd get out of work at 9, and I would go down to Dunkin' Donuts by the highway, and she would meet me there. We'd have a cup of coffee, you know, and talk, and the double entendres and all the everything was a sexual joke. So we were flirting with each other, and it was really just a matter of time. And one night we decided we would go down to the beach after work. And we ended up making love on the sand. Well, I fell for this woman head over heels. I mean, she was, I don't know why, because she was still married. Maybe she was a damsel in distress I needed to save. It wasn't my place being a married man, but I just felt that way. And I honestly wanted to be. I wanted to be her hero. So we began a relationship, and I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. Here I am. I got a pregnant wife at home, and I'm down the beach with the other woman after work. It's just, I have no excuse. I was an asshole. I was a dead, junky, fuckhead asshole. I wasn't a junkie, but I was a fuckhead asshole completely. I own that. I have no problem with that. No excuses. I did what I did, and I can't change it. Whatever. Ann and I became so close that I decided I would leave my wife, but I couldn't leave without being there for the birth of my daughter. So as the birth came closer, she was due in April, and this was after the first of the year, and it's kind of funny looking back on it now. For Christmas of 1990, Ann helped me shop Renee, and I spent well over $500 on I won't say a wardrobe, but a really nice suit, a leather jacket, and she wore that leather jacket for many years afterwards. And I don't know if she even knew, but Ann's the one who picked it out. I like that. Every time I saw her in it, I kind of chuckled after that. Well, as the birth got closer, I was still spending time with Ann all the time, and out till 1, 2 in the morning, and telling my wife that I was going to AA meetings and 12-stepping guys and helping people deal with stuff. And, I was lying like a cheap rug. It was terrible. I'm not proud of any of it, but I did it and I own it. It is what it is. Made me who I am today. It is part of the process. So anyways, April 12th, 1991. Actually, it was April 11th. Yeah, April 11th. I had bought my wife for her birthday a Nintendo 64, and she just got headstrong into the Mario and Luigi thing there, whatever it was. And I mean, we were up 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning every night playing this stupid game when I was home. And it was April 11th, 1990 that she told me that it was time. She had to go to the hospital because her water broke. I'm pretty sure that's when her water broke. And we went to the well, what ended up happening was she really wasn't in pain. She wasn't having contractions right away. So she got ready and dressed and went to work. Crazy lady. She worked right up to the birth. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she called me and we met at the hospital. And they measured her, and she was at 9 centimeters. Well, 10 centimeters, here comes the baby, right? This was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and about 6:30 that night, she was still at 9 centimeters and was in so much pain. It was just horrific. I couldn't stand it. I mean, I was there. I was holding her hand, trying to comfort her. How do you comfort a woman who there's no way you can help her with the pain? So finally, she didn't take any medication at all, nothing. We were doing it natural. And what happened was at 6:30, the doctor came in the room and we said, "You need something. This is just going on too long." And he said, "All right, let me do one more check." And lo and behold, he checks, and 10 centimeters. It's time. So after struggling with it for about a half hour and pushing and crying and screaming, at 7:05 p.m., out came Amanda Nicole Moonen. Without a doubt, the greatest experience of my life. Mine were the first eyes she saw. The nurse put her directly in my arms. I cut the umbilical cord. Then, thought I did, just the literal one, not the figurative one. She was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. I was so proud, and to be honest with you, to this day, I never loved anyone more than I loved my ex-wife at that particular time. No matter what a freaking bad person she is now, she gave me a beautiful daughter for a little while. Our daughter was born April 12th, 1991, 7:05 p.m. Greatest day of my life, without a doubt. Nothing has come close since. There have been, I've accomplished a lot since then, but nothing will ever compare to watching my child be born. So anyways, we get, I guess I should say it. I mean, Renee stayed in the hospital that night, and yes, I spent the night with Anne. Again, not proud of it, did it. When the baby was born, the first phone call I made was not to my family, not to her family. It was to the group home to let everyone know we had a little girl. And Anne came down and we spent the night together. So anyways, a couple of days later, Renee and Amanda come home and we start building our life. That's what Renee thought. I was trying to figure out when to leave. I knew I was leaving. I knew I couldn't stay. I knew I was going to keep cheating on her, and she didn't deserve that. And that was my thinking. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was trying to save her because I was young, dumb, full of cum, and just plain stupid. And I didn't see it stopping. And especially with Anne, I wanted to be with Anne more than I wanted to be with Renee. May 12th, ironically, Mother's Day. Again, I am not proud of this, but it's something I did and I own it. I told my ex-wife on May 12th, I got home at like 2 o'clock in the morning again, and she knew. Of course she knew. I told her that I didn't want to work on the marriage anymore. And she said, if I leave, I'm never coming back. Because she had left once and come back prior. And I said, I understand. I get it. And I knew it was the best thing for her. Because, like I said, I wasn't going to stop cheating. So the next morning, she took Amanda and they moved in with her mother again. And I went to work. I came home to a completely, well, not completely, almost completely empty house. She left me a sofa, a TV stand, a plate, a dish, a fork, and a knife, and I think a coffee cup. And that was it. And that's pretty much what I deserved. I knew I was a piece of shit, and she shouldn't be leaving me anywhere. So anything. So I figured I'd just get on with living. I did feel bad. I didn't want her to leave. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, and I just, it was not going to happen. Ironically, she had to drive by the house. Renee had to drive by the house every day to and from work because we lived right down the street from the hospital. And there were many times I'm sure she saw Ian's car there. So what ended up happening for that summer, all of that summer, I would go to Renee and say, I want you back. I want you back. And she would say, no, I don't want to. I'm not coming back. You had a chance. Then I would go to Ann and say, she doesn't understand. She's such a bitch, yada, yada. And, me and Ann would do our thing. I get the chance. I got to meet Ann's two boys, Tim and Mike. They hated me because I was coming between mom and dad. And, it was just a bad situation all around. And, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. All I knew was I was in love with this beautiful woman and she wanted to be with me. It got to the point where Labor Day weekend, 1991, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was at Ann's house and the yuck that was inside of me, the guilt and the remorse was just eating me alive. So we woke up, me and Ann woke up, we had coffee, breakfast, whatever, I don't remember. But she got in the shower and I was sitting there at the table and just bawling my eyes out because I knew I shouldn't be there. I was in the wrong, I was wrong, dead wrong. And it was a Sunday, the Sunday before Labor Day. And I knew my daughter and my ex would be at my sister's house in Lowell. And I went there and I knocked on the door. My brother-in-law, Ron, opened the door. I said, what do you want? See, I was not liked by anyone at that point. Renee came out and we were on the back porch or the back deck. And I told her about Ann. I told her I was cheating. I said, I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't want to do it. It's just behavior I can't stop. And she said, you better get help. And I asked her to take me and she said, no, you can go. You know where it is. I've been working in the field for, at that point, 5 or 6 years. So I knew the routine. So what I did was I went to a place in Lowell called Solomon's Mental Health Center. I don't recommend it. What happened was I got there and I told them that I was suicidal. I had been cheating on my wife. And I wasn't going to kill myself, but I knew if I said that, they'd have to hospitalize me. I had insurance. There was no reason they shouldn't. So I told them I'm suicidal and that I needed help. And not 10 minutes later, they came back and said, well, unfortunately, we don't take your insurance. You're going to have to go to your primary hospital in Haverhill. I said, okay, how am I supposed to get there? And they asked if there was anybody who would give me a ride. I said, well, no, I pissed everybody off in the world. Nobody's going to take me. Family, I have no friends anymore. I certainly wasn't calling Ann. I had just left her in the shower. She got out of the shower. I have no idea what she said to herself. But it blew my mind. But I had to drive from Lowell, Mass to Haverhill, Mass, which is probably about a half hour to 45-minute drive. And they thought it was okay for me in a suicidal state to do this. That's when I realized that, money is more important than human life. And I saw it then, and it's even more relevant now. So much more relevant now. I got to the hospital in Haverhill. They They emergency admitted me to a psych hospital up in New Hampshire, Hampstead Hospital. I was there for 2 weeks, treated as a bipolar. And actually, it was there that I really started going to AA meetings because there was nothing else to do. And I was an alcoholic, or am an alcoholic. And started going to meetings, got involved. They would take us to meetings in Windham, New Hampshire, all over the place. Take us on, to commitments where you go and listen to people speak. I just started getting really active. I got a sponsor, probably the greatest man I've ever known in my life. His name was Leo Doe. It sounds fake, but it's not. That was actually his name. Great man, God rest his soul. He taught me more about being a grown, responsible adult than anyone prior to him at that point. A lot of his teachings I hold true today, and I've actually used to help others. Leo was a dear man. He was 100% Cherokee. He was thinner than I am. Okay, I weighed more than he did. What does that tell you? But the man was tough as nails. He was from Charlestown, Mass. Total badass. Great man, though. Great man. We used to we'd go to meetings, and then after the meetings, go play pool for hours and hours. And I was just one of his pigeons, as they called, sponsored, called the people they were working with. And I learned a lot about recovery at that point. Leo got me into explaining to me and helping me to understand what the steps were, what the traditions were, and how to live them in your life. And to this day, I honestly, even though I drink now, I still think I have more recovery than most people who are in AA. That's just my opinion. I've been there. I've seen it. There are a lot of people who are just dry and don't know what to do. There's a recovery that's involved, and if you pursue it, it's worth it, because no matter what happens in life, it makes you a better human being. But anyways, for the next literally 4 years, I didn't date. Ann and I had broken up when I went into Hampstead. In fact, one night while I was in there, it was during the day actually, I called Ann to come so that I could tell her I couldn't see her anymore. And she got there, and we were sitting out in the smoking room, and you can see the parking lot from the smoking room. And I looked out into the parking lot, and there was Renee with Amanda. They were coming to see me. So I told Ann to go out the other door. Well, Renee came in, and the first thing she did was say, "Where is she?" Because she saw Ann's car. She knew she was there. And I said she left out the other door. I didn't want the confrontation. And I reached over to touch Amanda's arm, and Renee just pulled her away from me, wouldn't let me. I said, And I knew, honestly, at that point, I knew. And honestly, prior to our separation, before we got divorced, Renee had been asking me an awful lot of questions about my molestation as a kid, what I went through and how I dealt with it. And speaking of which, I skipped a whole part at the shelter. It was there that I was working when my sister, the abuser, showed up. She needed a place to be. She needed a home. So we took her in at the shelter and got her into a rehab. And honestly, she's doing great now. She sobered up. She had lost her 2 little girls, got them back, married. Now they own a home out in Illinois. Woohoo. God bless you. But anyways, back to Renee and that whole situation. After that was done, I delved into AA, and I started learning more about myself, and I found out there's really a lot I don't know. So I decided to reach out to some people who could answer questions that I just couldn't find. Like I said, what I knew about my dad was mainly taught to me from my older sisters, who were all abused by him. So they had kind of a one-sided story. And Dr. Phil says it all the time: every pancake has two sides. Well, I didn't know the whole story. All I knew was their side. So I used to drive up every October. I would drive up to Catskill, New York, and see my uncle John. He was my father's brother, and him and his wife Florence would take me in. I'd stay there for a weekend, maybe a couple days, and Aunt Florence filled me in on a lot about my dad, explaining, when he moved here, his father had died on the trip over from Ireland, and his mother died in 1939 when she caught pneumonia crossing the 29th Street Bridge. So every time I hear the song Feeling Groovy, I think of my grandmother. Even though I never met the woman, never saw a picture, nothing. Neither one of my father's parents. But the only grandparent apparently that I met was my mother's father, who died when I was 2 years old. So I grew up without brothers, for the most part, without my dad, no grandparents. It was my mom and my sisters. That's how I grew up. But in speaking with Aunt Florence, she taught me a lot about Dad and how he became the way he was. And it helped me to see some of my own behaviors. They say the same-sex parent is the best role model. And I did model a lot of my dad's behaviors with the drinking and everything. Dealing with tragedy is never easy. And even when it's self-made tragedy, like a divorce, like cheating. But losing my brothers and my father and then my stepfather, and so much death. My nephew, my 19-year-old nephew Arthur, who was my sister Karen, the one I moved back here to live with from California. Her son committed suicide, 19 years old, married, 2 kids. Really sad. He had a tough life. But dealing with tragedy is never easy. And I learned a lot about my dad. I used to go to Long Island every now and then, see my Aunt Judy, who was my mother's sister. I couldn't get information from my mom. I couldn't ask my mom for the information because she was older and fragile. I didn't want to bring up stuff that she had already dealt with or didn't deal with and didn't want to. I didn't want to add anything negative to her life. So I go see Aunt Judy, who was a beautiful woman. She was a heavy woman, but she had a heart of gold. She had muscular dystrophy. That's how she passed. God rest her soul. But her and her daughter, Camelia, who actually is a New York City police person, they taught me a lot about Mom and what she was like growing up. And I have a bunch of pictures of my mom and my dad from back in the 40s when my dad was in the Marines. And I can see a lot of dysfunctional behavior, that's for sure. But anyways, I learned a lot about my parents, which helped me to learn a lot about myself, why I do the things I do, My ex-wife used to tell me, she used to ask me why I always walked around on my tiptoes, and I never noticed it. I guess it turns out it's an ACOA thing, Adult Children of Alcoholic. When I was a kid, I didn't want to make any noise, so I always tiptoed around the house. And I literally, to this day, unless I catch myself, I still do it. I tiptoe because I don't want anyone to hear or see me. And it's complete and unnecessary fear. But so I got on with that, and at that point I decided, well, maybe I should try dating again. So I tried dating a couple of women, had some fun. There was this girl, Sue Viglione, who we went to Montreal one weekend, watched the Bruins win a hockey game up in Montreal, which was cool. I've always been a big Bruins fan. That was a blast. I got involved with this woman, Shannon, who had a son. She was only 19, but she had a son, Forrest, who was a beautiful kid. And Shannon and I, it's kind of weird. We connected on a whole different level than a boyfriend-girlfriend. It was more of a, we would make out and stuff, but we never had sex. Well, actually, we did once, but I won't get into that. She was a heck of a gal, but I honestly did fall in love with her. She was, something else. She was everything I really ever wanted in a woman at the time. And when she broke up with me, she literally broke my heart. But she comforted me through it. That's the kind of girl she was. And she's here in Derry now. I've seen her a couple of times, and we've chatted. But I started seeing this girl, Denise. The name, I know, Denise. It's a bad name for me. Denise was an Italian redhead from Boston, and red flag all over the place there, right? She was batshit crazy, man. This woman, she had a gun. She had 4 different kids from 3 different dads. Living in the project. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I mean, she could suck the chrome off a trailer hitch, which was a big part of it. But, sorry if that offends anyone, but it was a sexual thing. So, and then that's pretty much all it turned out to be. I ended up ending that relationship, and I remember Phil Smith, the cop with the Salem Police Department, who was a good friend of mine, used to laugh about it all the time, make fun of me. And he was right. That was just a bad bet going in, and I should have seen it. But regardless, what ended up happening as I was working at a convenience store. It was really my first, my first real experience working at a corporate convenience store. It's called Store 24. It was in Salem, New Hampshire. And I took the job as a part-time job because I forget what I was doing at the time. But I enjoyed the work. I met a lot of great people. My daughter used to come there for her visits from time to time. And, we'd go down to the pizza shop next door, get dinner or whatever. All during this time, by the way, and I should explain, at the end of our marriage, after I got out of the psych hospital and we went to court for the divorce, it was ordered that my visits be supervised because I was emotionally unstable. Well, who am I to argue? I just got out of a psych ward. So the supervisor was going to be my ex-wife until we could come up with a professional. And my visits were supervised from the start. I've only been alone with my daughter once, and that was when she was maybe 2-3 weeks old. Renee was working, and I took the baby. I had a doctor's appointment, took the baby with me to a therapist, my therapist, and introduced him to her, and then went to her mother's house. And that was the only time I was ever alone with her. I mean, every other time after that, to this day, we were supervised, mostly by her mother. Her mother did the visits. We would visit at the hospital where she worked in the waiting room. It was quite humiliating for me, but I would do anything to see my daughter. I just wanted to be a part of my daughter's life. It's never changed. Didn't change then. It hasn't changed now. You know, the only reason I left my marriage was because I didn't want to hurt my ex. Go figure. Now all I wanted was my daughter to know what having two parents was like, living in two different homes at different times. You know, I saw the ideal situation as me getting her on weekends or, you know, half the time, shared parenting. You know, I didn't know anything about it at the time, what shared parenting was. I didn't know what anything was. I didn't know what my rights were. I didn't know anything. And she had a lawyer. I didn't. It was just, you know, it was doomed from the start, apparently. But after the divorce, the final divorce hearing in the parking lot, I was in my little red Honda CRX, and I saw Renee walk out of the courtroom, and I called her over to the car, and she came over. And I'll never forget that. I said to her, Renee, no matter what you do, don't use Amanda to get back at me. And she said, oh, if I wanted to get back at you, you'd be dead now. Well, the truth is, I wish she had killed me back then. At least my daughter wouldn't have to deal with the bullshit she's going through now. Anyways. So the whole time during all of this, the trips to New York, the dating these women, I'm visiting with my daughter once a week, maybe 1, 2, if I'm lucky, 3 hours. We would go to the park sometimes, Wendy's, McDonald's, you know, just out and about. And I loved every minute of it. I cherish every moment I ever spent with that little girl. After a couple of years of Renee doing the visits, she said she wouldn't do them anymore. I had to find a supervisor, a professional. So I contacted this woman named Anthe. She worked for the Department of Social Services, and she agreed to do the visits at a rate of $20 an hour. I said, okay, I can handle that. And we would visit once a week, usually at my house. Anthe would come over, and Amanda and I would play pick-up sticks or hide and seek or something. We must have watched Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 500 times over a 6-month period. It was constant. It was always on. She loved that movie. And in fact, one time it cost me $100 because it was going to take 5 hours, but I took Amanda to a circus or a carnival in Methuen, and she won a blow up shark, throwing darts. She was good. She was very agile. She was very good at hand-eye coordination. Just really, the kid's smart. The kid was always smart. But like I said, I cherish every moment I ever spent with the child. Well, Anthe had to stop after, I don't know, a year, maybe a year and a half. And my ex started doing the visits again, and we started doing different things. We went roller skating one day. Amanda and I won the limbo contest that day. It was really cool. It was very, very cool. Bowling, we used to spend time at the bowling alley. The older she got, the more time we spent at the bowling alley because there was more to do. I to this day still have her first score sheet. I think I had it on my old page. The think she got like an 84 with the bumper guards, obviously. But in Candlepin, that's a great score. But our visits went on, and I went on when I wasn't with Amanda, on the self-discovery tour. And I was working in Salem, New Hampshire at this convenience store, Store 24. And one day, lo and behold, who comes in? Ann Byron, the woman I left my wife for. I'll be damned, big hug. How are you? Good. What are you up to? I said, just life. And she had been seeing someone, but that just ended. So we got together for a game of backgammon. We used to play a lot of backgammon. I asked her to come over the house, and one thing led to another. We started seeing each other again. And this time it was different because I wasn't married. She had been separated from her husband all this time now. We're talking like 8 years, but still hadn't divorced him. Which, again, the red flag's there. Why are you not seeing it? That was my thinking. But my thinking now. We started seeing each other again, and I'll tell you what, I had become store manager by this time, and was making really good money. The most money I ever made in retail, I think. Yeah, it really was. And I lavished her. We went on trips. We went to Arizona for a week to see my mom, introduced her to my mom and my older sister. We went to New Jersey to Six Flags. We went Broadway plays, dinner all over. I mean, I spent a fortune on this woman, and I bought her an engagement ring. And about a year after we started seeing each other again, we were going to see Celine Dion in concert. Remember, it was pretty sure it was April 7th of that would have been 97. And what happened was she came over after she was a school teacher, and after work she came over. I made her dinner. She loved just salad with different types of chicken on it. So I made these incredible dishes, salad dishes with chicken, and we had it out on the deck at the house I was living in. It was really quite beautiful, the woods all around and the nature everywhere. And while we were eating dinner prior to going to the concert, which I really should have thought through, because she could have said no, I got down on my knee and I asked her to marry me. And she said that she couldn't right now, but she would once the divorce was over. The next day she went to court, filed the papers, and I'm thinking, wow, here we go. This is it. What ended up happening was I moved in with her, and we lived together for close to a year. And I was a jealous puck. He was, the ex was, especially when I was around, the ex always knew I was there. But I remember when Ann told her son Mike that he was that she was going to marry me. His response was nightmare. Like, it's a nightmare. Okay. Man, what the hell was I thinking? This woman had a hold on me, though. She's still to this day. I don't know if she called now. I don't know if I could say no. I honestly don't know what I'd do. But anyways, so we lived a happy year and a half, 2 years. And then, the ex, he just kept coming around, and I couldn't take it. So I ended up leaving. I got involved with this men's group, Sterling Men's Weekend, it was called, and met some incredible people, old friends, new friends. What it was a group of men would go on this weekend together. Mine was in Poughkeepsie, New York. It was in November of '96. And it was basically an initiation of manhood. The roles of men and women were discussed, and basically old school values, but really, very informative stuff. I learned a lot there that I still preach today too. All these different things I went through, the AA, the men's weekend, the different courses I took in college, everything led me to where I'm at now. And then as time went on, Ann and I split up. And really all I had left was Amanda at this point, and that was enough for me. Renee didn't want to do the visits anymore, so we got another supervisor who was a mutual friend of ours, who was a school teacher. She had married my best friend from years gone by. Her name was Barbara Gilmet. Beautiful woman. She had 2 daughters, Chrissy and Stephanie. And Stephanie was always there. Occasionally Chrissy was. She was older. But we always had a good time over there. She was in first grade at the time, Amanda, and I'd help her with her homework and writing and stuff. And I still have all of her paintings, and I still have her first grade report card and everything. I still get all those memories. And that's when the first allegation came up. I found out that I was under investigation for some type of inappropriate behavior. Well, DSS, Department of Social Services in Massachusetts, where Anthony, the first supervisor, had worked, did an investigation. And when they asked Amanda what happened, she said that during our visits, Amanda and I used to play this game called Major Tickle Action, where I would tickle her. She loved it. And she said that during one point, and ironically, she said I tickled her knee, which honestly, I don't think I may have once or twice, somewhere along the line. But she said that when I did that, at the same time, she had to pee, so it felt like I touched her there. And boy, I was bullshit. Oh my God, the red flags that were going up. I knew it was obvious that she was being coached by her mother and her grandmother. My ex-mother-in-law never liked me from the moment we met, because when Renee and I met at Kmart, I started going to AA, and Renee's mom, my ex-mother-in-law, couldn't stand alcoholics. So I was doomed from the start there. Well, I know, and I would bet my soul that Renee and her mother both coached my daughter to believe that she had been touched inappropriately by her father. And if you've heard anything my daughter's had to say recently, it's become a whole lot more than that. Now, granted, this whole time, every visit we ever had was supervised, mostly by her mother. So, I don't understand how anybody can justify what happened to her. And what pisses me off the most is that she won't listen to my side of the story. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Barbara had to stop doing the visits. And when she did, she wrote a letter outlining what the visits were like and how it was always a positive experience for her. We did great things. We had a lot of fun. We used to go outside, and she loves to play soccer. We'd play soccer, and Barbara had a dog, and Amanda loved Corey the dog. She was a good kid and a good dog, and Amanda loved her. So it was always a wonderful experience until the coaching and the prompting came into play. And at this point, my daughter is 6 years old, so she's still highly impressionable, obviously. And she spends 7 days a week with her mother and her grandmother, and 1 hour a week with me, maybe 2. So, I was pretty much at a deficit from the beginning, and I put myself there, and I understand that, but I never put my daughter in this position. I never would, and it's as far as I'll go with that. So Renee started doing the visits again. We'd go back to the bowling alley, and we always had a good time. Always had a good time. And then Renee said she didn't want to do it anymore, so we ended up connecting with the Salem Visitation Center in Salem, New Hampshire, which was a mobile home in basically the backyard of the Salem, New Hampshire Police Department. And we would go there, and I would get there 10 minutes early. She would show up. I'd give her a hug, tell her I love her. We'd play games, whatever, pick up sticks, do her homework. They had a little toy kitchen set up in there. She would pretend to make me dinner, stuff like that. We made the best that we could with what we had. And this went on through October of 1998, when the supervisor said to me during one of my last visits with her. Her name was Pam. I'll never forget that fucking face, and if I ever see her again, I'll have a few words for her. She said, when Amanda comes in, don't initiate physical contact. Let her hug you first. I said, fuck you. I'm paying you $60 an hour to see my daughter for 1 hour a week. I'm hugging my daughter and telling her I love her. Well, little did I know that what Miss Pam, the supervisor, put into the notes was, and I throw up in my mouth a little bit every time I think about this, inappropriate physical contact. Well, you know what that did. That set up a whole maelstrom of bullshit that I wasn't even aware of. I didn't even know what was going, that she had written that or any of this had happened. During this process, my daughter, my ex moved with my daughter to a new location, and she wouldn't tell me the address, the phone number, anything. And I should put in there that I used to talk to my daughter in between visits. I would call her, 3 or 4 times a week. And we always said at the end, look up at the moon, and you'll see my reflection and I'll see yours. The moon became very special to us. And the last thing we always said, I would say, I love you. She would say, I love you back. I would say, I miss you. She would say, I miss you. And I would say, you're my best friend. And she would say, you're my best friend. And God, she meant it. I really feel she meant it. I remember she sent me a letter once. She mailed me a letter, and it was cute. She only mailed me a letter because the stationery was like sandwich bread and bologna and cheese. And so she made me a sandwich, and the envelope was the sandwich bag. I forget. I have it somewhere. In fact, I posted it a long time ago. But all it said, Dad, you're the best dad ever. I love you, Amanda. And, I believed her. I honestly believed her. And I think she did too at that time. But what ended up happening was my ex started, like I said, she moved, turns out, to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was living, I believe, here in Derry, maybe Salem. But she wouldn't give me the address or the phone number. So I went to court, filed a motion. She was served. I went to court. She never showed up at the court date. So the judge gave me her address and phone number. Now, I specifically wrote in the modification, it was a complaint for modification or contempt, one of the two. And I had learned from a friend who was a family friend who was a family lawyer. He couldn't represent me because I couldn't come up with a retainer. Good family friend. But anyways, he said, make sure that you always use the word so that I want to get her phone number so that I can continue the relationship we had. And that's what I put in the order. I need her address and her phone number so that we can continue the relationship we've had. And the judge gave me the order, gave me the phone number, gave me the address. I went home, and by the time this got to court, it must have been near the end of 99. It was just about Christmas of 99. And I called immediately, and my ex-wife answered, and I said, the judge gave me the phone number and the address, so I wanted to talk to my daughter. She said, all this order says is you can call. It doesn't say I have to let you talk to her. I'm like, what? Are you crazy? I said, read the order, Renee. It says so that we can continue the relationship we had. So that doesn't say anything about you talking to her or calling her or anything like that. I was livid. I was absolutely freaking livid. She hung up on me. I kept calling back. I have every right to talk to my daughter. It's written in black and white. Read it. And she just wouldn't. She kept hanging up and hanging up and hanging up. So I lived in my anger for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and it's the Rockingham County Sheriff's Department, and they have a restraining order for me. Apparently she went and filed a restraining order for harassment. Isn't that ironic? So we had a court date a couple days later. I'm ready. I'm fighting this one balls to the wall. I got the court order. I mean, they can't deny me. We get there, and during our testimonies, I explained my side to the judge, and while she was explaining her side, she explained to the judge that I was being investigated for sexual molestation of my daughter. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And the judge was pissed when I said that, but that's pretty much where I was at. I just couldn't believe it. So apparently the Salem, New Hampshire Police Department was conducting an investigation on me. So from the courthouse, I went to, and the phone number thing never got resolved. I never did get to call my daughter. I drove up there many a time, and I sat outside waiting for him to come out. Never happened, but after the court date, I went right to the Salem Police Department. I talked to Sergeant Mark Kavanaugh, a detective, and he was doing the investigation. And I said, what do you need for me to prove this didn't happen? And right there, I should have noticed it right there. I should have told the judge that if she's going to accuse me of something, she needs to prove I did it. I don't need to prove I didn't do it. How can I prove I didn't do it? Anyways. Oh, God, this still gets me so freaking worked up. I talked to the sergeant. I asked him, what can I do? He said, are you willing to take a lie detector test? I said, let's go. I was ready right there. Let's do this. I have nothing to hide. And he said, well, their machine was broken and they had to find another one. Okay. I said, I'll call. I called every day for 3 weeks. He kept saying, no, we don't have one. No, we don't have one. Finally, he gave in, and he said, we got one up in Concord at the state police headquarters. Great. Perfect. This way, if I'm guilty, you can arrest me right there. Let's go. So we make the arrangements. I go, and the way it's going to work is Mark Kavanaugh's not asking me any questions. It's an FBI agent. And God, I'm pretty sure his name was Mark. I don't remember entirely, but he told me to tell me everything I could remember about my life, going back to as early as I could remember. And I did, not unlike what I'm doing now, probably a little bit more in depth because I'm older. I've forgotten stuff, or stuff hasn't less relevant stuff doesn't matter anymore. But I talked to him for a good 3 hours about everything that happened in my life, from the molestation to the drug use to everything. I had nothing to hide. I told him absolutely everything. Every visit my daughter and I ever had were supervised. I've never been alone with the child, except for one time when she was like a week, maybe 2 weeks old. So at that point, he asked me, he hooked me up to the machine and everything, asked me 10 questions, and it came back non-deceptive. I wasn't lying. Why should I lie? I had nothing to lie about. After that was done, I was going to get in my car, and Sergeant Kavanaugh came up to me outside of the courthouse, or the state barracks. And he came up to me, he said, I talked to your daughter 4 times and she's sure something happened. What does that tell you? What did I say earlier about coaching? Anyways, he said, I was on the other side of the two-way mirror watching that whole interview. He said, and you're a man of honor. I wish there were more I could do for you. I feel bad. And I asked him, I said, can I get that in writing? And he said, all I can put is no finding. I was like, really? How about testifying for me in court? So I can't do that. Okay. So we got the no finding. At this point, the court had undergone an investigation into our lives. And at the time, I was living in a rooming house in Atkinson, New Hampshire, with 2 other guys who were not, the Atkinson's best citizens, we'll put it that way. They were the house was not family friendly, we'll put it that way. So Joe Fields, the court investigator, who better hope doesn't cross my path, came to the house, took a look around, was there maybe 5 minutes, and left. I don't know if he even asked me a question. We go back to court, and after the first investigation he did, they told me that my daughter was uncomfortable seeing me, and we had to scale back. What we're going to do is allow me to write my daughter a letter once a week. In fact, I might even have the right here. I wrote a letter once a week, and I sent it with the child support. And I know she got the child support because I was never found contempt, but my daughter somehow didn't get the letters. So, and the order, it just blows my freaking mind. The order says that she's to when she gets the letters, take them to her therapist. My daughter was seeing a therapist, and process it, and we would go over it after like 6 months. So, okay, it never happened. She never got the letters, and every time I brought it up, it became a contempt issue on my part because I kept going through jobs. And yeah, I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't keep my freaking head together. It's just a freaking nightmare, the whole thing. God, some of the stuff I've got here, Amanda, something she drew, when we were visiting, one of her pictures. There's so many of them, just so many. That's her writing. Amanda Nicole Moonen. That's my daughter's writing. I'm trying to find those letters. I thought they might be in here, but they're not. I made copies of every one of those letters, and I hope someday I can give them to her. But I did find a letter that Barbara wrote. I'll post all this stuff. I'll post all of the evidence again for those who are interested. Honestly, I don't know if anybody's even going to watch this, especially for this long. Christ, I'm up at 2 hours now. Wasn't planning. I was going to do this in parts, but at this point, whatever. So the investigations went on for about 3 years, at which time I had no contact with my daughter, except these letters that I was writing to the wind. I was working. I had taken a job with FedEx at a call-in center, and was making good money, living a decent life. I got a much nicer apartment here in Derry, 2-bedroom apartment, in which I set up one room just for her. And I asked the court to do another investigation. They did the investigation. They talked to Joe Fields, the cocksucker from Lawrence Courts. Talked to my ex-mother-in-law, my ex-wife, my daughter, whoever else on that side of the family, but never spoke a word to me. Didn't come up to my new apartment. Didn't see anything I was doing. Didn't even want to look. And came to the conclusion that the visits wouldn't happen. It would have to be revisited every 6 months. Like, what are you, fucking crazy? 6 months? It's been 3 years now since I've seen her. So in 2000, this was in 2001. In 2002, I had been working with a local theater group, and I decided to write a play, and they allowed me to produce it. And it was a Christmas story. It's on my YouTube channel. In fact, this channel, it's here. You can check it out if you want. It's long, but it's and it's novice. It was the first time I ever worked in a theater, directing, writing. I even acted in it a little bit, very little bit. But I wrote this play for my daughter. It was called The Gift, A Christmas Story. And it was about a man home alone on Christmas Day while his family went to the airport to pick up incoming relatives. And while he's walking around the home, he picks up a photo album. And flipping through the photo album, every time a new picture came up, that scene would be acted out. Like, there was a picture of him with his sister when they were kids meeting Santa Claus for the first time. So, we did the first scene was 2 kids walking downstairs and seeing Santa. It was a cute play. But anyways, I got a friend on the team, the theatrical team, made a DVD, VHS, the whole. I still have some VHSs. I'm not sure what the last DVD I had. I think I gave to the theater company's the theater company director, Tina, her husband Bill. I think I gave it to him. That was the last time I saw it. Until, ironically, my nephew sent me the copy I sent him. He sent it to me through email, and that's how I have it here. But anyways, my daughter got this play. She watched it, apparently, and agreed to do another visit. And, I was just off the wall through my head. The visit was set up for March 7th, 2003. I was never so prepared for anything. Oh, this was it. I was going to let her know that none of this shit happened. I loved her. She was the best part of my life. It's all I wanted her to know. And at this point, my mom, who really was my only supporter throughout this whole time, my family pretty much disowned me. The friends I had were all pretty new and really didn't know much about the situation. So my mom was my main source of support. Well, mom had been living in Arizona for like 20 years. And basically what happened was she didn't want to quit smoking. And my sister Ellen, who really was supporting her out in Arizona, told her she couldn't smoke anymore. So she said, fuck you, and moved up to Illinois with my other sister, the abuser. There she is again. And it was March 6th, 2003, probably about 7, 8 o'clock at night, literally 24 hours away from the first visit with my daughter in 5 years. And I get a phone call from my sister in Illinois. And she tells me that mom has been taken to the hospital and is probably not coming home. She's basically on her deathbed. Now, obviously, this just shook me, rattled me. This was, mom was all I had, literally all I had, because Amanda was gone. Everything was gone except for mom. She was the only steady influence in my life, always consistently there, regardless of what I did to her. I put her through hell, especially out in California. God, we were out all kinds of nights partying. In fact, my stepfather once told me that she used to stay up every night and wait until I got home, usually not until 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, crying, hoping I was okay. And when he told me that, it just broke my heart. And that's really when mom and I got extremely close. And anyway, she was on her deathbed. I find this out 24 hours before my visit with my daughter. So I'm just, my boss at the time, I was running a flooring business down in Salem at the time. And my boss told me, go be there for your daughter. And my head was gone. I was gone. The next night I get to the visit and pay my $60. Amanda walks through the door. She's got a Girl Scout uniform on. I remember she brought some pictures of her and her friends. I'm pretty sure at my favorite beach in the world, Wallace Sands, although it may have been Rye, somewhere up the New Hampshire coast. And we had this visit, and I couldn't say a word. I was dumbfounded. I was devastated. I spent most of the time wondering if my mother was going to be alive when I got done with the visit so I could talk to her. And it just, to this day, I will never, well, I can't say that. I'll never forget what my sister did. I have to forgive her because otherwise the anger, if I didn't forgive the people I need to forgive, my anger would have me in jail or dead, one of the two. So, the visit wasn't at all what it should have been on my part, and that's my bad. I couldn't separate. I couldn't compartmentalize two very, very highly emotional events all at once. Well, after the visit, went home, called mom. Got contacted an airline, flew out there the next day, and my other sisters did too. So all 4 of my sisters and I were there with my mom at the hospital. Now, the way my sisters made this an event, to this day, still kind of bothers me. Taking pictures of mom in probably the worst state of her life. I have a photo album, which I will never share. Pictures of all of us standing around smiling. It was just total bullshit. But anyways, I was there for my mom at the end, I held her hand most of the time. When everybody else went back to my sister's house to sleep, I'd stay at the hospital to be with my mom. I'm pretty sure it was Sunday. the 5th of March. Mom, she was in and out of it. She was somewhat coherent, but really wasn't. She couldn't communicate much. And we were all just, it was just a matter of time. We didn't know what to do. And my nieces were there. Karen, Kimberly, Chrissy, all of my nieces, most of my nieces were there. And we're standing in the hotel room and the hospital room. And my sister Eileen, who is the second oldest, she lives actually not too far from me. She told me to give her my phone. So I gave her my phone, and she called my ex-wife, Renee. When I left this out, which is really a crazy mistake. When my ex-wife moved out and went back with her mother was next door neighbors to my sister, and they were for years. They had a great relationship, but that ended when Renee moved back there. And they were there for a couple of years, and my sister never got to spend time with my daughter. And my ex completely excommunicated my entire family from my daughter's life, and that's exactly what she had in mind the whole freaking time. But what ended up happening was my sister Eileen, called my ex-wife and told her, Mom's not going to make it home from the hospital. She's at the end. Can you please let her talk to Amanda? And I'm devastated. I'm standing at the foot of the bed watching, and Amanda talked to my mom. Eileen sat there with Mom and listened to it. And all Amanda said was, "Thank you for being my grandma." And all my mom said was, "I love you." That was Mom. But I like to think, I'm pretty sure, Mom tried to communicate after that, but I think the last coherent conversation she ever had was with my daughter. And I'll take that to my grave, And, after all that, when I get back, after Mom died on Tuesday, March 7th, right around 11 o'clock in the morning. It was just devastating. To this day, it still hurts. I miss my mom terribly. But God, this is traumatic. I got back to New Hampshire, and my boss came over, and we were buddies, drinking buddies. We partied. He installed the floors. I sold them. We played in a band together. We were good friends. And he said something to me that I never would have even thought of. It took me 5 years to gain one visit with my daughter. 5 fucking years. And he said to me, if you hadn't done everything you've been doing, it would, that wouldn't have happened. Same thing with Amanda talking to my mom. That wouldn't have happened. And it just kind of made me feel somewhat successful, I guess. I don't know. A little bit better about myself. But after that, my daughter's birthday is April 12th. And I tried to get back into court to get another visit. And what happened was on April 12th, I called my daughter to say happy birthday. She was receptive, told me she was doing some the stamp books, those books that they used to do, scrapbooks. That was a big hobby back then. And she told me that it's funny, she told me she loved llamas. I went through a stage after Dr. Doolittle when I loved llamas when I was a kid. So what I ended up doing was I looked into buying her a llama, and I would have done it. It would not have been an issue, but they told me that you had to buy two. Llamas can't be alone. And I could afford one, not two. Turns out probably to be a good thing. I don't know. But I didn't want to deny her anything. I honestly didn't. After that, it wasn't too long after that, I got a letter in the mail saying that my daughter didn't want to visit with me anymore. She didn't want any contact with me at all. And I was just devastated. I've lost my child. Honestly, through no fault of my own. I mean, yeah, I cheated on my wife, but that shouldn't cost me my daughter. It cost me my marriage. It shouldn't cost me my daughter. It shouldn't cost my daughter her father. But anyways, I had to find a solution. I didn't know what to do, and we had a court date set for sometime in September. I don't remember the exact date, and I worked with an old friend of mine, this kid, David Rosignol. He was he graduated law school. He just never took the bar. And he gave me some information that was helpful. He told me I needed to find what was called a tort remedy, which I had no idea what that was. But I started going to the Lawrence Law Library and looking all of this stuff up. And I found something I could use, and created a counter order to what they had projected. And I mean, I knew I was doomed. I knew my daughter was doomed. I knew we weren't going to see each other again. And so I wanted to do something that would let her know that I loved her, and I would always be there for her. So I forget if it was Louisiana or Mississippi, one of those southern states. I found a case where a parent who had lost visitation with their children requested that part of the child support that's being paid be put into a trust fund that the child can get when they're 18. So when we went into court, it was a different judge. The original judge, Marcia Dixon. What the fuck? Let me tell you, heart rate here. Oh, this woman. This judge was, talk about one side. I can't remember her name. Marcia Manzi Dodge, I believe was the name. She was the judge. And when we went back for the final hearing, there was a male judge, a different judge, and it blew my mind. He had a freaking ponytail, seemed okay. And I presented my case. I said, there's nothing I want more in my life than to be a part of my daughter's life. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know she's been alienated. I didn't know to say that she's been coached. I didn't know any of that. So I presented my offer. I requested that 25% of the child support, or $25, one of the two, it pretty much the same amount, be put into a trust fund that Amanda get when she was 18. Now at this point she's 13, so it's 5 years. It's going to add up, and she'll have a decent little nest egg when she graduates high school. And the judge was kind of impressed with me, which, wow, somebody actually showed me some respect in court. Go figure. And he granted it, and it was issued. And my ex had to set up a trust fund, and the account would be, I would have access to the account to see what that it was being handled. And as far as visitation was concerned, it would be reviewed every 6 months. Her lawyer would contact me, and we would look into see if there was any chance of doing any kind of visitation. Oh, needless to say, I never heard from her lawyer. Probably what happened was in 2003, after these visits were done, it was the end of 2003. The flooring business I was working at, my buddy there, the owner, he decided to close up shop, and lost another job, lost the ability to pay child support. Boom, back in court, contempt. Your Honor, we want this trust fund stopped. I said, Your Honor, I haven't seen any proof the trust fund was ever set up. I said, well, no, you're in contempt. We'll just we're going to cancel that order. Like, really? What, it's, to this day, dumbfounds me. And the only thing I know is I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And man, did they take me through they just raked me through the friggin' coals. The courts, my ex, everyone, all at my daughter's expense. Whew. Jeez. So the trust fund was stopped. I don't know that it was ever there. I don't know if my daughter even knows it was there. I don't know if my daughter knows I wrote her every week for almost a year. I still have the letters, probably in my file box. But the visit stopped, and she's 13. I now can't contact her, at least until she's 18. And let me tell you what, the next 5 years were the kind of hell nobody should ever have to experience. Christmas, her birthday, my birthday, Father's Day, Mother's Day, every single one of them, man. It was just traumatic, every single one of them. I used to listen to the music to slash her throat by, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill myself. I couldn't leave her with that too. That was my thinking, and I couldn't. That's, to this day, my thinking. I'm not going to commit suicide so that her mother can say, see, I was right. Fuck that. Fuck that. My ex may have won. She, to this point, I mean, she may have eliminated from my daughter's life, but I'm still her father. My name's on the birth certificate. I still love her. Every beat of my heart beats for her. I miss her. I miss her angrily. But back to the 2003 to 2009. After the flooring business closed, I got a job working as a store manager at an auto parts place, where I was making really good money. And of course, when that happened, my ex took me right back to court to get more money because I was making more money. And according to the guidelines, it should be now this. So I was paying $180 a week and not allowed to have any contact with my daughter. Just, I paid it, kept paying it. After about 6 months, I couldn't take it anymore. I was at the end. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't be here. So I left. I quit my job. I was also working part-time at a little convenience store here in Derry, just making extra money. In December of 2004, I made another mistake. I moved to Illinois, lived with my sister, the abuser, who seemed to think it was me who was abusing her back then. And that's the story she's sticking to. God bless her. Fucking cunt. She's got her head right up her ass. I lived there for 2 years. It was a manufacturing town that had lost all of its manufacturing, pretty much retail. That was about it. And there was 150,000 people, and the unemployment rate was over 15%. So finding work was not an easy task. I met a beautiful woman, a fantastic woman. Sandy Engstrom Dingus. Her and her husband Tim and their son Eric were beautiful people. Sandy opened a restaurant called Halsa, which is Swedish for healthy, and it was an all organic, all natural restaurant. Everything was all natural or organic, and I'll tell you what, the food was fantastic. I never ate better in my life. More healthy, anyways. But that didn't last long. Upper scale. I mean, who's going to pay $7 for a sandwich when you go to McDonald's and hit the dollar menu? I did get a job working for the Rockford Riverhawks in their concessions. That was probably the most fun job I ever had. We would get there a couple hours before the games would start. The professional baseball team out in Illinois, Rockford, Illinois, Rockford Riverhawks. I still have their hat around here somewhere. That was a great job. I'd get there 2 hours early before the game. We'd set everything up. During the first 5 or 6 innings, I was a runner. I would have to go make sure the girls out at the beer garden had enough supplies, food, beer, whatever. All the concession stands had the right amount of hot dogs and so forth. And we'd get done. My job was over like the 5th or 6th inning. I'd just go hang out in the beer garden, drink, and watch the baseball game. It was great waking up in the morning, seeing my work schedule in the sports section. It was everything I could have wanted. But it's not a year-round sport. So everything was so difficult, just hard. There was no work, and it was hard to live there. I ended up getting into some bad behavior. I hooked up with the wrong people. Actually got into, had a little bit of an issue with cocaine. Got into a major battle with a coke dealer. If you look at this white mark here, that was from when he smashed my face into the cement. But it was just a bad scene all around. So I decided to come back here. I came back in December of 2006. And it's kind of funny, in 2004, the Red Sox finally won that first World Series. And, it was a beautiful thing. Wasn't everything it could have been because I couldn't share it with my daughter, but I'm sure she saw it. Then when I moved to Illinois in 2005, I rooted for the White Sox, and they won the World Series. Came back here in 2007, the Red Sox won the World Series. And I was starting to get, a little bit egocentric about that, but I know I'm not that important. In 2007, I came back here. I got a job. I told myself all I want to do is I'm going to get an overnight position, have as little human contact as possible, go home in the morning, get drunk, watch sports, pass out, get up and do it again. That was my goal. That was the entire goal in life. And I lived that way for 2 years. And I mean, I was not a happy camp. I was the angry old man who lived down the street, basically, the grumpy old guy. And I was secluded. I was a complete hermit. I had very little human contact. It's just kind of funny. That's when I met Babette, and she's been a part of my life for the most part since. I'll get to her later. I worked overnights at a convenience store here in Derry, 7-Eleven. It was a franchise, so there were no vacations or benefits of any kind. I worked there for 5.5 years. I got one raise, and that was after I'd been there 6 months. So I went 5 years without a raise. But my boss was good. The franchise owner, he took care of me. when I got back here from Illinois, I found out I was sleeping in my car at a rest area in Salem on Route 93. There's a knock on my window early in the morning, and it's a cop. Like, okay, I'm sleeping in the rest area. I didn't think that was illegal. So he asked me why, and I'm just waking up. I'm like, no, I just moved back here from Illinois. I had Illinois plates on my car. And he said, let me see your license. So I gave him my license. It was still my New Hampshire license. He went to, he ran it, came back a little while later and said that it was suspended. And don't ask me why he did this. I don't understand it. I'm not questioning it. He gave me back my license and he said, all right, I'm going to leave, wait about 5 minutes and then leave and take care of this. Okay. So I went up to 7-Eleven. I talked to the boss there, got a job. Started making money again. I was only making $9 an hour, $360 a week doesn't go far, but it allowed me to get my license back. It cost me almost $600 to get my license back. Thank you, Family Courts. Got my license back. Once again, started living in rooming homes, single rooms, just renting rooms and houses. It allowed me to be alone, which is all I wanted. So I did this for quite a while. And in 2009, I found out about this thing called Facebook. And I opened up an account and went looking for my daughter to see if she was on there. Lo and behold, she is. So I started following her. I never said anything to her, didn't do anything. I looked up her high school. I knew she'd be graduating high school that year. I found out when her graduation was, made plans, went to the graduation, and look in the program, and there's her name. That might even be here. Amanda Como, she's coming. She'll be right after Ashley Cox or something like that. Chelmsford High School. This is my daughter's graduation. Class of 2009. God, this pisses me off. Where is she? Oh, it's a large graduating class. I'm not going to look up her name. But she wasn't there. They skipped right over her name, never said a word. I went and asked everyone, what happened? Why isn't my daughter there? Her name's here. Nobody could tell me anything. In fact, one person said, oh, yeah, I saw her over there. She wasn't there. My daughter was never there. So I got home and was kind of like, what the hell happened? So I sent her a message on Facebook and said, I went to your graduation. I was hoping I could talk to you, and she said, of course I wasn't there. I had gone to an alternative school, and if you had been a part of my life, you would have known I was a valedictorian in my class. Like, there's nothing I want more than to be a part of your life. I haven't been able to. You didn't want me there. That's what you told the courts. I didn't put the blame on her. I just said, there's nothing I wouldn't do to be a part of your life. And we actually started talking. We talked for about 2 weeks, conversing through the Facebook messages. And she said that she was open to getting lunch, talking, all of this, and then just out of the blue, I don't know where it came from. Out of the blue, I know where it came from. She talked to her mother, and all she said was, fuck you, Tom, you equaled bad, you're a pedo, all this stuff. And I don't ever want to hear from you again, this and that. And I said, I'm sorry you feel that way. I said, don't let my inability to be there for you take away from the person that you are. I said, you're a smart and you're an intelligent, beautiful, child who can, has a lot to offer this world, who can do anything you want. I tried to be as positive and uplifting for her as I could. And I never heard from her after that. But when I found Facebook, lo and behold, I found out that, there are other parents like me. And back then, God, I met this woman, and I can't remember her name, but she went by the name Pepper Unkempt. And we started talking quite a bit. I believe she's in New York. I don't know what happened to her. I honestly don't. But she let me know that there are other people out there just like me. And I think I might have to finish this another time. My battery's dying. But all right, I will. I'm going to end this there. I mean, it's Jesus. I'm sorry, 2.5 hours. I didn't realize I could talk that much. I'll do my perspective on the movement when I finish this video. I hope that gives you a little bit better idea of who I am, where I come from, why I do what I do, and whatever. I feel better having gotten it out. Okay, so I hope, like I said, I hope somebody gets something out of it. Anyone who's going through the process now, I hope maybe you heard something that could help you in your case to be a part of your kids' lives. That's all I want. I want families to be restored, So I'll finish this video either later today or tomorrow. And get to the point where I'm at right now, which is very significant. Honestly, I'm at a crossroads in my life right now, which I will explain more. Thanks for taking the time. I know it was a long video, but 53 years old is a lot of life there. You all have a great day. Happy Sunday. Share the love. Just share the love. It's all it takes. Everybody can love. It just remember, love is just a word until you give it meaning. Thanks, folks.